All right, Jeremy, you good to go up there? Excellent. All right, good morning, everyone. Woohoo, that's it. Come on, this is a small, I want to hear it from the crowd. Let's hear it. Good morning. Let's get going. Thank you. We have a bunch of folks who are registered as well who are going to be coming and going during the day. So congrats to you all for coming early to kick us off. That's great. So welcome to our third E2Tech Expo. And third annual. We are going to be continuing to do this every year thanks to the success of folks like you coming to join us. My name is Patrick Coughlin. I am the board of E2Tech, so I welcome you. And I will be emceeing this event, so you're stuck with me for a few hours. I will try to keep my comments brief and keep the speakers moving up here so you can hear the good stuff. And also in my spare time, I am part owner of St. Germain Collins, an environmental consulting and engineering firm out in Westbrook. So with that, I do want to thank our sponsors for this event. They are shown up here on the slide. We have our demonstration sponsors of Eaton Peabody, Normando Associates, Pierce Atwood, Bernstein Schurer, and the Maine Energy Marketers Association. Don't worry, I'm not going to read all the sponsors. But we also have our R&D sponsors, our media sponsor, Portland Press Herald, Maine Sunday Telegram, all the exhibitors and partners. Please be sure to visit all the exhibitors. Many of you have seen the folks here on the first floor, and there are some awesome folks up on the second floor as well. We'll be serving lunch up there later on, so you can have a chance to go up and talk to them about what they are offering as well. And we also have green energy, courtesy of Maine Green Power. Thank you. And our commercialization sponsor is MTI, Maine Technology Institute. And in a moment here, we'll have Brian Whitney come up and introduce that. But first, I wanted to just give a big round of applause for all of our sponsors. So please join with me. Without our sponsors, we really could not make this happen. All right, and with that, let's bring up Brian, our MTI commercialization sponsor, and for a few opening remarks.
Good morning. So I'm delighted to be here this morning to help kick off the third annual E2Tech Expo, the premier energy and environmental innovation and business event of the year. As the Expo's commercialization sponsor, the Maine Technology Institute is proud to join the many other sponsors and E2Tech members to play a role in helping to provide the necessary funding to bring you a day's worth of inspiring speakers, engaging and informative panel presentations, and terrific networking opportunities. The Maine Technology Institute has been pleased to be involved with E2Tech since its inception, and we continue to be impressed by its amazing growth and impact. True to its mission, E2Tech has truly served as a catalyst to stimulate growth in our state's environmental, energy, and clean technology sectors. To illustrate the point and how much of a catalyst it's been, MTI has now invested in over 130 different companies in those technology sectors, with investments ranging from $5,000 to $1.2 million, from market research to equity, and in innovations that range from tidal energy to sustainability software. All told, we have invested approximately $13 million in awards to the environmental, energy, and clean technology sectors, and have helped leverage more than $23 million in private sector matching funds. So finally, I want to make sure that I mention that this expo is obviously the culmination of many months of planning by E2Tech's exceptional staff and board, I deeply appreciate their dedicated and tireless commitment, and I want to utilize this opportunity to specifically commend Jeff Marks, Melissa Winnie, and Allison Clift for their tireless efforts in pulling today's event together. Please join me in a round of applause. Again, MTI is proud to collaborate with E2Tech and all our partners and companies in Maine's innovation economy, and we look forward to an amazing day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brian. And I do want to echo the thank yous to the staff. You've done a fantastic job getting this together. In case you didn't notice, if you haven't met Melissa Winnie, there is a picture of her on the front of the program here. She's a little younger then. All right. Now, as a bonus for attending this expo, you get to participate or at least witness our annual meeting for E2Tech. We are a nonprofit organization, and as part of our bylaws, we must have an annual meeting. And what better opportunity than when most of our members are here in the room, or many of them. So with that, I'm going to call our annual meeting to order. I'd like to see a show of hands of folks who are members of E2Tech. Please raise your hand. Awesome. That's a lot. And that is more than 25, Jeff. I'd say, there we go. We have an official quorum. I would be remiss in, we have a number of attorneys on in our membership and on our board, and someone reminded me we have to say something about antitrust. So as you are participating in the expo today, please don't talk about pricing or anything like that. If you'd like to read our full antitrust statement, it's available on our website. So with the quorum, we have a few business items to tend to. We have another slide. The next, am I? That would be for me. All right. There we go. We have quite a diverse organization with E2Tech, and I wanted to jump ahead to, we're talking about we're going to jump right into the members. I have them on the slide. Let's keep going. All right. We're going to jump ahead to you. Here we go. So E2Tech is made up of volunteers on our board. You have here listed before you in the table the folks who are on the board through this year, next year, and the following year. So part of our role here today is to re-elect some board members and to elect some new board members. So for our renewing board members, these are the folks that we have convinced it's an amazing opportunity to continue on the board. We have Chad Allen from Chinbro, and if folks are here, who I mentioned their name, please stand up and remain standing so we can congratulate you. Chad Allen from Chinbro, David Ertz from DB Consulting. We have John Ferlin from Ocean Renewable Power Company. I know I saw John. There we go. And we have Becky Mativia from Sage Data Security. Becky, there we go. Jeff Thaler from University of Maine. Jeff may have been too far for him to go today. And Sarah Watts from Tetra Tech. Excellent. All right, so, and did I skip over Jim Katsifikis? Is Jim on the list for renewal? Okay, he's not in this one, but is he up there? All right, and Jim Katsifikis. Jim? There he is. All right, so for folks who are here, who are members, I'd like to ask you to approve those returning board members by a show of hands. So if you're in favor of that, please raise your hand. Excellent. Any opposed? Any not voting? All right, I think that passes with the majority of those folks. So round of applause for those members. Thank you very much. And now we have a few new members as well. We have 24 slots on our board, and we're adding 3 to round out our board. We have Lainey Brown from Concentric Energy Advisors, Sarah Tracy from Pierce Atwood, and Paul Williamson from Apex. I believe Sarah is here. Sarah, there we go, in back. And Lainey or Paul, I don't think they could make it today. All right, so Sarah and Lainey and Paul, I'd like to see a show of hands on if those folks approve of those new board members. Raise your hand. Excellent. Any opposed? Any not voting? Perfect. So welcome aboard. Thank you, Sarah, Lainey, and Paul. Okay, now back to the slideshow. E2Tech has a bunch of things that we do. We have various committees, marketing and membership. We have the program committee that puts together all the fantastic forums, and our strategic planning committee. I would like to recognize the chairs of those committees, Becky Mativier for marketing and membership. We have Bill Ferdinand on the program committee, and we have John Furland for the strategic planning committee. And those folks, I don't think Bill, is Bill here? No Bill, but we have certainly Becky and John. So thank you folks for your service. There we go. And these are great pictures. I just can't describe them. They're great. So we have, this is our team, and we have a dedicated staff, and again, they've done a great job putting this together for us today. Please become a member if you're not already. Information on membership is available for many of our members of our staff or board, or you can find on our website. The benefits of membership are great. Highlights from the last year: we had 12 events with over 2,000 people. We have been in the news. We are promoting environment and energy topics throughout Maine and New England. We were recognized Sunrise Guide's Steward of Sustainability, and we are doing and continue to do a number of grant projects in cooperation with Maine Technology Institute and other organizations helping to promote energy and environmental topics here in Maine. We had the expo last year with over 300 registered attendees. We are continuing on grant work, and we help startups in all phases of development, from the person working in a garage to folks coming up with great ideas in a large organization. That's what we're here to help with. And we continue to work with the Department of Energy and the state of Maine on developing an energy roadmap for the state for the next 2 years. In the events, you can take a look at them. How many here went to at least one event in the last year? There we go. Great show of hands. We've had some fantastic forums in the last year. We have additional ones coming up for the remainder of this year and into next year. Please continue to come join our events. If you're interested in helping us develop new events, come join us and serve on our program committee. Coming up, we have in November the Expo. You're here. Good job. And in December, we have our networking reception. We have worked on a number of projects, and if you want any more details on these, please see some of the materials we have here and online and talk to our staff. The Clean Tech Leadership Index, which is a national index of clean tech activities by state, Maine has soared. This is fantastic. We are now up to the top 10. Just behind Nevada. We're close on their heels. We're going to take them out this year. And we're really glad that this index is highlighting the work that many folks in the state are doing. So we had the nominees and now board members. And we got the returning ones. We have the holiday reception. We've got the expo. When is that? We're good. And with that, I think we're good. Therefore, we close our annual meeting. So thank you very much for your patience with that. So jumping right into the next item, we have asked Congresswoman Shelley Pingree to join us here to give some comments. She's a little busy right now down in Washington, but she did send us some comments by video. So I did want to, although she doesn't need much of an introduction, I did want to take the opportunity to mention, of course, from the College of Atlantic and North Haven. She then made it into the Senate and served 4 terms here in the state of Maine. We'll mention that bios for all our speakers are in your materials here, so please feel free to read them. And we will give highlights as we introduce each of the speakers here today. In 2008, Shelley was elected to the U.S. Congress to serve Maine's 1st District, first woman to be elected to represent this district, and she continues to serve us today. So with that, we have a video from Ms. Pingree. So Jeff, or Jeremy, there we go.
Hello, I'm Congresswoman Shelley Pingree. I'm sorry I couldn't attend this year's E2Tech Expo, but I appreciate the chance to share an update from Washington. First, I want to thank the E2Tech Council and all its members for your work to build a more sustainable economy in Maine. In the environmental challenges our nation faces, there are also opportunities. While making the changes we need to shift to cleaner energy sources, improve public health, and protect clean air, water, and other natural resources, we can also create new jobs and better economic opportunities for our communities. Thank you for making sure Maine is at the forefront of that movement. I'm doing everything I can to support it in Washington. I won't lie, that work has gotten a lot tougher in the last year. President Trump and his administration are doing their best to keep our country from addressing the environmental issues we are already facing. You all know the big-ticket items, like abandoning the Clean Power Plan, embracing fossil fuels, and withdrawing from the Paris Climate Accords. But many smaller actions may have gone under people's radars. The Trump administration's proposed budget decimated the kind of programs that innovative Maine businesses have been using to transition our economy. It proposed slashing or eliminating a range of research and development grant programs and sources of support for rural small businesses. On the House Appropriations Committee, I've worked hard to advocate for these important federal investments. We were able to work in a bipartisan way to restore funding in appropriations bills for many of them, but unfortunately not all. Legislation passed by the House has deep cuts for critical research programs at the Department of Energy's Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy. These backward cuts place the U.S. businesses at a competitive disadvantage in the global race to produce new forms of cleaner energy. I have serious concerns about the Republican tax reform plan as well. Among its provisions are derailing a bipartisan agreement reached on the wind energy production tax credit and phasing out the solar tax credit in 10 years. While I think there are tax reforms that should be made to help small businesses and Maine's working families, I don't think this plan offers those solutions. I plan on opposing it. While I'm fighting against these kinds of efforts, I'm also being proactive in proposing legislation to support innovation in Maine. For instance, Maine communities are doing great work to reduce food waste. What once went into landfills is now being turned into compost or even electricity by local companies. I've introduced the Food Recovery Act to invest in these kinds of initiatives and put more food to use. As challenging as the last year has been, it's also been inspiring to see people newly engaged in advocating for science and the environment. And despite Washington, people's wishes aren't changing. They want healthier products, cleaner energy, more efficient ways to get around, and a brighter future for their children. I think those desires will be met through your innovative work. I just think the federal government needs to do more to be on the right side of history. Thank you again, and take care.
All right, thank you very much, Congressman Pingree, Congresswoman, sorry. It's always amazing to get the perspective from Washington, and I'm glad she was able to join us, at least by video. I also noted the quality of that video was stunning. It's great to see that video brought to us. I just wanted to take a moment to thank the support staff here at USM. We've got Jeremy back in the booth making sure everything works well here. We've got countless folks making sure that the food and the recycling is taken care of. So round of applause for those folks as well. All right, with that, we will move on to our keynote speaker. And I wanted to take a moment to introduce Stephen Caldwell, President of E4 for the Future. So he had a long stint developing energy services as CEO, and he started E4 for the Future in 2015 to bring clean, efficient energy home. E4 for the Future is a small nonprofit working to advance clean, efficient solutions for residential customers across the U.S. The organization serves both as an actor and enabler of others' actions. It publishes, convenes, advocates, and develops demonstration projects. For decades, Steve worked to achieve measurable progress toward a strong and prosperous clean energy economy with a focus on the public good. He founded and directed numerous energy efficiency and renewable energy organizations, including the Conservation Services Group, headquartered in Westborough, Massachusetts. Under Steve's leadership, CSG designed and implemented conservation and renewable energy programs for utilities, state agencies, and other groups throughout the U.S., providing services to more than 3.2 million businesses and households. He successfully advocated for energy efficiency as a least-cost power supply option. He helped to create and build the residential energy efficiency industry through sound public policy, legislation, and establishment of trade ally networks, as well as the delivery of cost-effective programs. So please join with me in welcoming him.
Okay. Great. Thank you, Patrick. I like his bow tie. You like his bow tie? I couldn't resist that. Well, thank you for inviting me. It's great to be here up in Maine. I'm going to try to go through a pretty broad overview of the challenges that we have, the opportunities, and a direction, a path that I've been certainly working on for almost 40 years now. I will quickly run through the first couple of just a little bit more information about E for the Future and some of the background, some of which Petra already talked about, but then get into, again, this was pretty much, he already talked about that. What we did was, as CSG, incorporated in '84, so that was a while ago. And we were just starting, and there was a lot of stones to uncover and turn over and find out what's underneath them. Again, E for the Future, the 4 E's that we have focused on: energy, economy, equity, and the environment. That's really, if we could solve all 4 of those, wouldn't that be great? Okay, small task. And so our strategy is threefold. One is to look at breaking down the silos and trying to identify innovation that can bring the technology pieces into a whole. Secondly, on the really focusing on residential homes, because that's really where equity is most critical in terms of, I call it energy poverty. Many people have energy poverty by spending a way larger portion of their income on keeping their homes warm, keeping the lights on, etc. And fundamentally, we need to do this with policies, public policies, because this is critical to the future of our country and of the world, is to have policies that really direct us in the way to get to the future in a positive way. And I think Congresswoman Pingree was correct in terms of defend and resist bad ideas. Okay, here's a small little circle of issues that fit into our energy economy and into the future. And I'm going to go through each one and talk a little bit about how it fits and what the challenges are. You know, private capital, collaboration, et cetera. You can read this around. I'm going to go through each one. And hopefully, one of my goals is to get you all thinking, and when I'm finished, ask you all to have your thoughts and comments, add to this, what is missed, what do we need to do, and how have you identified sort of the direction. Okay, private capital. We need private capital, absolutely critical. There's some great folks around the region that have been doing it. Many of them are involved in organizations like E2Tech or the Northeast Clean Energy Council that is your ally and working jointly together. There's the Clean Tech Open. How do we take good new ideas and introduce them to the capital sources? In other words, finding that linkage between resources to create new companies or to build existing companies to be more effective. And a lot of times, my experience with capital folks is they sit and they wait for someone to knock on their door, right? Which can be a very difficult and frustrating process for a startup, right? So finding ways to make that and facilitate an easier connection between capital sources and potential either existing startup companies or ones that have ideas to expand. That is really critical, and we all need to work together to help facilitate that. Let's see. I forgot how many clicks I need to get the next piece. Collaboration. We need to collaborate. That's why it's so wonderful to see this organization. E2Tech is our partner from Maine for the Northeast Clean Energy Council. I sit on the board and was co-founder of NECEC, and we have partners in each of the states in the Northeast. And so the key is to have state-specific partners that are looking at on the ground, the things and challenges to deal with your energy challenges and opportunities, but then work together across the region. And you know, that's critical because we pretty much are and have to be an integrated energy region. And I'll get into that when I talk a little bit about ISO New England. Technology innovation, and I know this is something that all of you, many of you, are very heavily focused on technology innovation. Many times it covers a wide range of technologies, and many times to get success and get movement, you have to burrow down into a particular technology, whether it's storage, and it seems to me every day there's more technology innovation in storage batteries and types and kinds and sizes and how quickly they discharge or charge, you know, and how does it respond to value proposition and pricing. Wind, Maine has a lot of good wind, I've heard. If you go outside, you'll probably experience a little bit of it. Demand response, energy efficiency, clearly that's something that I've worked on for the last 40 years. Solar, EVs. These are all particular technologies and strategies on our energy economy. And we got to innovate for each type and each kind of technology, but we also have to bring it together. And that's one of the biggest challenges. How do you integrate the various kinds of technologies that are out there, that are on our plate, right? They're there, and they're changing, but how do you link them together so that they're most effective? Because a lot of these technologies are great in and of themselves, but there's issues on how to really work together. Okay, we can't forget the role of the utility. Right, Central Maine Power is interesting. I'll show it in the next slide. Has done some interesting things, and we've worked with Central Maine Power before. And one of the key challenges is what is the role of the utility going forward? What is it going to play? How is it going to participate? And historically, the utilities have been up over there. You know, okay, they take care of the wires, And of course, there's no blackouts, right? No loss of power. I've heard a rumor that you guys had a little bit of a blackout for a while. You lost a little bit of power. Suzanne is working with us, and she gave the recount, lost, what, 6 days? 6 days she lost power. Well, luckily it wasn't the midwinter, because a lot of people up here would have had their pipes freeze, etc. So, but the utility has a role to play, not just in keeping the lights on and keeping the wires, going and the electrons going, but it has a role to play in communicating with consumers and linking technologies and public policies to solutions. So we can't forget their role and make sure they participate. Very fascinating. I don't know if folks have seen this, but Massachusetts just went out for a substantial, big procurement of renewable resources, and one of the proposals was from Maine, right? You guys are going to bring your power down and help us out, but I had a presentation. I watched a presentation of the proposal from Central Maine Power to Massachusetts on how they can facilitate bringing wind, solar, both from Canada and here from Maine, down to Massachusetts to help us meet our RPS and other clean energy goals. So I thought that was a fascinating thing, but it's a good example of how, whether this proposal, there was 42 proposals, 42, I was blown away, on how to move large-scale renewable energy across the region and down specifically into Massachusetts, because that's one of our public policy goals, is to increase our availability of clean energy. But the fact that there was 42 different proposals, many from Canada, but from all over, I was just blown away. I have no idea how they're going to sort it out. One of them is the Maine Clean Power Connection proposal. How many people know about this? Okay, so it has been discussed and talked about. I wasn't sure. With some of these, you never know when they're just under the table, it's quietly sort of putting it together, but it will be fascinating. Okay. ISOs. You actually have in this room one of the experts on ISO policies and strategies. Raise your hand, Susan. Susan Covino was at PJM, which is the Mid-Atlantic ISO for many years, and is an expert on how ISOs, the ISO process of managing our electric grid and linking the costs, the delivery, and the creation of our electric infrastructure together into an open market. And that's clear. She recently retired from PJM, and she and I were on a board together, and she moved up to Maine.
Go Maine!
Yeah! So you have a real national expert on the role of the ISO. In the case of Maine, we're all together in ISO New England, right? And so how ISO New England addresses the forward capacity market and the hourly pricing on generation and access of various new technologies and new generating sources into that market as the market facilitator. How does the market facilitator work in keeping up with all of the new technologies and the challenges of some of these new technologies in managing the hourly reliability? As we have more wind and as we have more solar, this is a challenge, and certainly the utilities that I work with and have worked with around the country are attempting to face that challenge of intermittency. When the wind blows, electricity is produced. When it doesn't blow, it isn't. So how do we merge and take wind, solar, storage, demand response, and fit it all together into a clean solution? And the ISOs, and particularly ISO New England, has a critical role, some great folks there, but it's something that is, I think, important for all of us in each state and each technology silo to understand it and work with ISO. They have a process for doing that. This is an example, the forward capacity market. You look at up until 2009, it was all pretty much just your standard generating. When we did revise the forward capacity market, it was actually, what, 2008 was the, but it's a three-year forward looking procurement. But since it really went into effect with the opening up the procurement for a much wider range of resources, look at the change. Basically, active DR, energy efficiency, and active real-time electric generation, the generation is less and less critical. Energy efficiency and demand response have taken over the majority of our future reliable, available capacity, right? That's a revolution in our system that we need to both recognize and also figure out how best to use that system to promote the clean energy future, right? So that's not a small task. The folks at ISO New England struggle with how do we take these technologies and work them into our forward capacity market? But they clearly have done that, right? And how all of the folks here and across New England, if you have any questions, just ask Susan. Sorry, Susan. Okay, public investment. You have a great organization. Here at Efficiency Maine, they've done some great work, but the reality is we can't back away from the role of public investment and public entities, whether it's the energy offices or the groups like Efficiency Maine, and there's parallels in New York, it's ISERTA, in Massachusetts, the Mass Clean Energy Center, et cetera. And then the public utility commissions, right? Those public policy drivers and investment strategies for public investment in our energy infrastructure are critical. Efficiency Maine has done some great work. I'm very proud to say that CSG, Conservation Services Group, worked for Efficiency Maine, particularly on implementing its residential stimulus program, and they're still, Clear Result, who I sold the contracts to, is still working hard in this area. But we did 4,000 homes in a matter of, what, was it about 2 years, Michael? 4,000 homes. We averaged almost 30, I think it was 37% reduction as per a third-party evaluator. 37% reduction in energy use in those 4,000 homes. That was one of the highest percentage reductions that we were able to achieve in the country. What did that say to me? Let's see. It's cold up here sometimes. And you all have been around a long time, so there's many of the houses here in Maine are very old, right? And when they were built, they just did not have the ability to put in the kind of insulation, et cetera. So old housing, cold weather. There's a lot of energy poverty in this state in terms of the percentage of a consumer's household's income going to the energy that they need, right? That is a challenge that all of us need to recognize and to put into place in terms of better public policies, better implementation, and strategies to help people cope with that. And I'll tell you, those 4,000 homes that we reduced their energy use by 37%, they're a heck of a lot less impoverished than they were before that happened. So thank you to Efficiency Maine for taking that lead, and it was great working. Okay, if you look about public policy, just the policy underpinnings, whether it's state or federal. FERC, as you know, there's a new proposal from President Trump to the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission to essentially subsidize coal and nuclear on some basis that these big facilities are critical for reliability, which they're not. Even DOE's recent report has indicated that that's not true. As a matter of fact, just ask the folks in Japan near Fukushima how reliable that nuclear plant was. And also the other reality is that coal, even if you store coal, in cold weather, you can't dig it up and put it into the coal plant. So reliability from 1,000 miles away is not always there. And in fact, FERC has, I think, starting the process of really pushing back against proposals like that that have the only basis in that proposal is campaign promises, right? We can't have campaign promises run the energy infrastructure that we need. EPA, the RGGI, I'm glad to see, and I think Maine and all the RGGI states have to approve the new agreement on RGGI that it has reached, but each state has to now approve it. So this is a challenge. I reach out to you and say, put this on your radar in terms of working to keep Maine in RGGI and to approve its new proposed increase in RGGI procurement. Rate design, how do we link the rates, the way in which people pay for their energy with the value proposition, what's the value, and how do you monetize that so that the money gets to support the best system? That's not easy. I've been working actually for the last year trying with several utilities and environmental advocates, and NECEC has collaborated with and we've funded it, is how can we get people to agree on the new rate designs for the future given the structure of what we need going forward with the costs and the value. How do you link that together? We haven't succeeded. A year later, we have not gotten to agreement, but we're still trying, right? How do you value climate? How do you value improved climate, assuming we all agree that climate is changing? Maintain reliability, microgrids. There's a lot of discussion, particularly up here in Maine, around microgrids, particularly around industrial facilities and neighborhoods around it, communities. And that's a challenge. How do you define a microgrid? How do you define it from the point of view of how much is locally generated, how much is stored, how much does it island away from the full grid at times of you know, when the grid loses power, can it island itself? These are real challenges in terms of how to do it technically. How do you do the islanding in a way that actually works? There are several companies we're working with that have this technology. Several times we've heard that what they thought was island did. The power goes down and the switch doesn't actually turn on and maintain the island, and it drops. So we're still working on the question of that. Obviously, cost and economy are the bottom lines, but those policies need to be put in place. Those policies need to be focused on both at the state and at the federal and at the regional level. The marketplace. Ultimately, the marketplace needs to be there to deliver the services the consumers, whether they're commercial, industrial, residential, need to be able to take advantage of the new, growing, improving electric system, energy system. I say not just electric, obviously. And there's some great examples of folks here in this room working with businesses, being a business to deliver in the marketplace, but also understanding what the challenges are from those consumers, linking consumers' needs with technology opportunities. That's the role of the marketplace, and we need to strengthen it. And there's some great folks here. One of the things that E4Future is doing, we work with DOE on a national jobs report. They did a jobs report every year for clean energy, energy efficiency, solar, et cetera. They took all the sectors and they figured out how many jobs. It turned out, in 2016 report, was that the clean energy jobs were twice oil, gas, and coal put together. That was a little embarrassing. So DOE has canceled doing any more jobs reports. E4Future is working with a whole bunch of other foundations and former Secretary Ernie Moniz to try to take that work and continue it. We've raised almost $750,000, and we're focusing on one of the things that we did with that report. We did it by congressional district. We broke it down for energy efficiency by congressional district and by state, right? So we could educate, because we went in and talked to Congress people, my government affairs, and we'd tell the Congress, it was mainly Republicans, they had 4,522 energy efficiency jobs in their district. The response was, what? 4,000 jobs? They were just, what kind of companies? Who's doing this? So what we did was we created the jobs report, then the faces of EE. We took people, Molly Toothaker, the heat doctor, Falmouth, Maine. Molly, you know, we have a couple of Maine folks. What we did is we did at conferences, we took pictures and asked people to sign off on being able to say who they work for, what kind of work do they do, and so we could bring this to congressional offices and prove these are real people with real jobs and doing good stuff that they love doing. Here's some more. Alice Rosenberg, Energy Efficiency, Pownell, Maine. Peter Thayer, Western Maine Community Action, for doing the low-income WAP program, and Frank Stevens. And it'd be interesting to see how well this E2Tech has brought in the low-income weatherization community, because they really started a lot of this. But these faces of EE, and we're going to expand it to clean energy as well, has made an impact by bringing the who, the what are you doing, and then who's doing it together. And so we're hoping that this kind of an activity can help bring it down to earth and make it real. So this is the combo, okay? This is the combo of challenges that we have to deal with our energy future, that we have to bring all these together, whether it's the capital, the market, the ISOs, the utilities. Piece of cake, right? No problem. So what policy considerations? Let's overview, as I've summary of some of the challenges on the policy side, the time variable rates, I mentioned that, and grid mod, how much do we have to improve our grid so it doesn't go down for 6 days? New technology, how to integrate that, how do we incorporate both demand response and energy efficiency, in terms of how to deal with the profile of our energy, smart meters, capacity markets, I've mentioned that, and we have some uncertain national challenges. Congresswoman certainly has laid that out. The work that we are doing work, we have a national government affairs person, E for the Future has in Washington, that's taking the jobs information and the faces of EE to congressional offices, and I can assure you every time she talks to me about what's going on, I roll my eyeballs and say, oh, damn, we got work to do to really bring the education. Not in a confrontational way. I don't want to be confrontational. It's hard not to sometimes with really dumb ideas, but to be educational. Show this is what the numbers are. This is what the need is, etc. It is wonderful. 19 states are still upholding the Clean Power Plan, or the Paris Agreement. Cities, Portland. There's a lot you could do in this city. These are the new United States Climate Alliance, the states that have signed on to the Paris Accord. What it says is that at the state level is really the centerpiece of our energy economy, and there's lots that you can do, and that's great to see this organization really pulling forward. So what's the path forward? I'm going to lay out a path forward of what I think we need to do collectively. One, energy efficiency, reduce consumption by 40%. We did it here, right? So that means we can do it elsewhere. Integrate the short-term and the long-term DR and EE into an integrated package. The natural gas bridge, which was seen 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, have natural gas replace oil and coal, has pretty much hit a wall. We've done as much as we can. So we have to then move beyond that. Use CHP, combined heat and power, is a tremendous technology. Convert all vehicles to electric. You see, China has made, and some of our major GM, several of our major automobile companies have basically said, we have to go electric, all electric, because that's where we have to be. We need to reinforce that and see how that fits in with charging stations, the nature of the electric vehicles, create microgrids powered by both renewable energy and CHP, large-scale investment in renewable energy, carbon tax and invest. And I just don't want to underestimate the organizational linkages, NECEC, E2Tech, SEPA, which is the Smart Energy Power Association that Susan and I were both on the board of, Advanced Energy Economy, et cetera. There are state, regional, and national organizations that are critical, and thank you all for being part of E2Tech and the linkage between E2Tech and NECEC, because fundamentally, at least my analysis, and I think this is actually, I don't say conservative, we have a 25-year window to really make the change, and 50 years to be complete, but it's actually, this is a little bit old. Some of the scientists from Woods Hole and other national scientific who are watching climate change basically say, sorry, Steve, it's not 25 years, it's 10. We need to be moving seriously fast within the next 10 years and basically achieve it within 30 years if we are not going to hit the alternative, which is like my little car analogy, which is to crash and then burn, right? I have 5 going on 6 grandchildren. And I think every day, darn, I don't want to leave my grandchildren with that outcome. So upbeat, you know? It's very easy to be discouraging, but we can't. So that's my presentation. I tried to cover the landscape. I would love it if thoughts and comments from anyone in the audience. Am I out to lunch here? Am I too conservative? Ideas. Microphones on either side. And how are you fitting into this, and what are the challenges you see in achieving these objectives? What are your challenges? And how is E2Tech helping achieve that? Yep. It's a couple.
All right, I'll start off with one. So
Okay.
if you electrify all the vehicles, do we have the capacity to charge all those vehicles with our grid? What does it do to the power generation side of things in here in New England?
That is a really good question, because that is the challenge that a lot of organizations are struggling with in terms of, should the charging stations be privately owned? Should it be utilities? Should it be public policy that puts in charging stations? There's the long-term charging. There's the short-term charging, and some of the vehicles are changing literally over month to month. So that this is a future challenge of how to combine the charging structure with the utility system, and then the nature of the automobile, the electric automobiles. How much can they be used as the source of power when they're not being charged, right? And there's a lot of technology. There's a lot of good ideas on how to use the batteries in those vehicles as a underlying technology opportunity. So that's getting there. Not quite there yet. Yes.
I'm Peter Monroe, and I'm on the leadership group of the Portland chapter of Citizens Climate Lobby.
Okay.
I just spent Monday and Tuesday in Washington, D.C., meeting with our members of Congress and actual members of Congress from Maine, all of them except Susan Collins, our senior staff. And I'd just like to say your point number 8, which was cap or
Cap and invest.
cap or price on carbon. Citizens Climate Lobby is meeting with almost every member of Congress to advocate for a price on carbon with all money returned in equal shares to all American households. And the source of optimism, which is not being reported in the media, is that there is a sea change within Congress going on the Republicans' willingness to listen to solutions about climate that involve market forces rather than regulatory. So yeah, they're against the Clean Power Plan because it's all regulation, but they are not against price on carbon that's applied equally across all greenhouse gas emissions. So, and the number of Republicans willing to engage that is huge. It's growing. That's the big deal. So I'm not going to go into any more about that, except to say that I would urge you to emphasize that, because the impact of that would be to drive all of our innovation into a clean energy revolution. Everybody would be scurrying to minimize the amount of carbon in their products. And that would drive everybody to the businesses that you're trying to support and the networks you're trying to build. So, and without the federal piece, the state and local actions just don't amount to the same kind of scale at which the problem exists, which is the federal level. So I would urge you to do whatever you can to support this kind of a federal solution, which is being advocated both within the White House and on the Republican side, as well as on the Democratic side. Thank you very much.
No, I would agree, but I'm unfortunately going to have to push back a little bit, which is that a price on carbon, while valuable, is not going to achieve the objectives that we need for two reasons. One is I don't think we'll get a high enough price to make the impact. And secondly, our energy system is heavily dependent and will be now and in the future on public policies and investments in our infrastructure, our energy infrastructure. We're not going to be able to change that. So my push is, yes, a cap and invest. You still need public policies to invest in things that we're not going to get on a straight market pricing.
Okay, well, I'll go with you on that,
Okay.
except to say that this is only one step. We're going to need sequestration, we're going to need other investments, we're going to need other policies.
Absolutely.
But without the fairness, the giant subsidy of fossil fuels is that they're creating pollution that they're not paying for. They have external costs that society is bearing, but they're not paying. That would be reversed by putting the price on carbon, and it would be a steadily rising price, $10 per ton per year increase, or more as needed to meet the goals that we need to meet for planetary safety. So I disagree about the pricing. The pricing can be made, and the proposal is adequate to meet the challenge. On the investment side, you're absolutely right. More policies will be needed. Thanks.
Okay, over here.
Is this mic working?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Jim Lebrecht. I'm the technical advisor for the governor on energy. And I wanted to mention that your segments of influences on our energy and environmental future, I think we're missing the two biggest factors that carry more weight than all those that you had listed, and that is the social and political influences that really dominate which direction things go in. So I think you might want to add that. And secondly, I want to add that it isn't always just about putting more money in things. The governor's heat pump program so far saves 16 times more carbon per year than all the solar is to date, and at 1/8 the cost. So it's reducing oil, and we don't have to go to the Treasury to make that program work. So keep that in mind. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I would agree that interesting. One of the technologies that has made an absolute leap of innovation is the heat pump. Back, 15, 20 years ago, I did some studies of actual heat pump performance in the field in various locations around the country, and it wasn't that good. The technology wasn't basically particularly for places like Maine, is when the temperature hit a certain amount, it was the resistance heat kicked on. And so, but what's happened is the new high-performance heat pumps that have just within the last 4 or 5 years have just made a tremendous leap in efficiency and not doing what I just said in terms of backup resistance heat, which is not that efficient. So technology in that area has proven to be a big shift. Over here.
Thanks. I'm Andrew Calise, energy efficiency and real estate entrepreneur. You had mentioned earlier that you see the ability of natural gas to provide that bridge as being limited, and it sounded like you were, I guess I'd like a little bit more detail around what you think the limitations are. In other words, why isn't it cost effective for that distribution to continue to be expanded? Because, on a whole bunch of levels, from geopolitical, social reasons to why we would want to use domestic energy sources, all the way through a higher efficiency, generally speaking, of the appliances that use that fuel. I'm just curious to see, I guess to hear your thoughts on what those limitations are, and if you see, what the role of natural gas is in the future, just because we have it in certain areas here in Maine, and just the majority of the homes here in Maine, as you probably know, are heated on oil.
Right.
And natural gas is vastly cheaper, and is actually vastly cheaper than electricity as well. So interested in your comments. Thanks.
Okay, no, the three things on that point. One is in order to have the amount of gas we need for both electric generation, because this region has shifted heavily to gas. So electric generation is now heavily gas, and many homes have converted from oil to gas. And what we've discovered is we don't have enough gas. We'd have to put in massive pipelines to really hit the amount of gas we need to go any further, right? The problem with those pipelines is, first, they're very controversial. It's hard to get them through. But also of greater concern is that going to lock us into carbon, burning a fuel that creates carbon? Even though it's better than oil, it still creates carbon, and we can't do that. And if we lock ourselves into a 30, 40-year gas economy, energy economy, that's not going to solve our climate. It's going to make it worse. And number two is, I gotta remember what my number two was. So there's the supply issue, there's the continued locking into carbon, and three is we have better alternatives. Even though short-term, solar and wind and renewables and anaerobic digestion, blah, 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 are perhaps a little more expensive than natural gas, is that long-term, we need it for environmental reasons, but the prices are going down dramatically, and they will be less long-term cost than even natural gas, given even in spite of fracking. So those are my reasons, those are my responses. We can argue about this because it is a legitimate issue in terms of how much we rely on that versus not. Over here, yep.
Thank you. I'm Ron Brown. I'm the section chair for the Electrical Engineers Professional Society in Maine. And I'd like to comment on some of the things you said. You listed all the different technologies. What I see is that, a little bit of each is ultimately what we need. We need to look across the whole thing. What are the impacts of everything? Positive. Everything has a negative impact too. And think about things like that. And the other thing that I see too that doesn't get mentioned is the whole NIMBY thing. If my neighbor puts in a solar panel, it obstructs my view. My God, my house is worth 50% less, which is nonsense. But that's the mentality that we have here. And that somehow needs to be overcome before we can do a lot of this. And I'll also suggest there's a book out by a fellow named Tom Fisher, who's a design professor at the University of Minnesota. He talked to the University of New England last year. It's called Designing Our Way to a Better Future. And it gets into how all of this has to be pulled together. And if we don't put all the pieces together, I don't think it's going to work. And we need to make it work. Thank you.
Yes, we definitely need to pull the pieces together, particularly since the new technology frontier is very much piecemeal, meaning it's, there's lots of more pieces than putting up one great big, huge coal-burning generator and saying, okay, we're done, right? Well, if we do that, we are done. In a way, we don't want to be done. But the solution, it does mean multiple technologies brought closer to home. The NIMBY issue is real, and we have to address that. And we need to have the technologies, the integration technologies, and we're working with a lot of companies that are doing that integration technology, with computers and smart devices that can take in and out and manage that in and out so that the multi-technologies can work together, just like make believe it was a coal plant, except for it was sun, wind, storage, et cetera, working together. So we can do it, and the technology is going to allow us to do it. Yes?
Good morning, Stephen. I'm Ken, not Evangeline, with GHG Underground. It seems to me that in forgetting one item at the end of the list there, you're in very good company, and I would say that you're probably qualified to be Secretary of Energy with that there. But,
not in this administration.
no, actually in this administration, because that is the current Secretary of Energy. But anyway,
All right.
you said, I'm referring to Mr. Perry there.
Yes.
In any event, you said you're interested in challenges, and especially at the residential level. Well, it occurred to me sitting there listening to your remarks, and after our recent power outage, when our house was out for 4 days, we have neighbors who are out for 6 and 8 days. A small business that I visited was out for only 3 days, but that was enough to destroy all their stored food in their, in their small delicatessen. But I think that a challenge that could be taken on, and I'll articulate this for you, would be to try to replace and obviate and replace with energy from reliable renewable resources half of the backup generators in Maine within 10 years. We have a backup generator. It's powered by propane. I wish that we didn't have it, but based on the economics, I'm sure glad we did have it this time. But I don't think that there's a challenge for you that you might want to comment on. Thanks.
Sure. Just as an interesting question, how many people in this room either have or know someone who has a backup generation? I guess you live in Maine, huh? Rural areas, long distances between sources and delivery, a couple of trees here and there, that is a real reliability challenge. And you're right, I live in a little town in western Massachusetts. There's a little neighborhood around a pond, it's called Goose Pond, and 100% of the homes in that neighborhood of it's about 80 or 90 homes has to have backup generation because it loses power so often. So backup power, critical, but solar and battery, it's not that far off. That package of, rather than replace the propane or diesel generation with a battery and a solar panel, that's coming. It's pretty much here. It will be here, and that's the replacement. It's going to happen. Yes, over here.
Yeah, first, thank you for coming and visiting with us. It was a worthwhile presentation. I feel my time was well spent listening to you, sir. But I have a question.
Sure.
It not only goes to you, but to others. Why is it that it appears that all marine hydrokinetics are excluded from your presentation and from many others, and things like tidal aren't even mentioned hardly anymore, when there's a different attitude in Canada and Western Europe, and there's just millions of horsepower, millions and millions of horsepower, sitting just off our coast, the West Coast, and if you start adding in the potential of in-river generation, not necessarily dammed hydro, but strictly in-river, you're talking some massive amounts of power. And I think it's a little unfortunate that it's kind of, solar, win, and that's the end of the conversation. I think that's very unfortunate because we know that tides are predictable. We don't have that reliability question, is the wind going to blow or not? And ocean currents are predictable for years and years ahead. So I think it ought to be at least a little bit of a reawakening. Wait a minute, are we missing something here? And thank you again for coming and sharing with us.
Okay, I will accept your critique. I think I mentioned hydro once or twice, but you're right. Hydropower, and there's more recently, there's been additional micro hydro, small scale hydro, and inline hydro in river. Interestingly enough, in the project that I'm working on in my own hometown around trying to get renewable power, we checked into, there's a dam at Goose Pond, and we found a micro hydro developer, mainly in Europe, came over, and we discovered that someone once saw a sturgeon in Goose Pond. That's an endangered species. We can't put any hydro because someone someday at some point in the last 50 years saw a sturgeon. So there are tremendous challenges, and that's, look, I'm in favor of saving sturgeons and, environmental issues like that, but there are lots of challenges to update what we can put, where we can put it, and how we get it approved. But it is part of the solution, I agree, and so it's one of the pieces. Yes, here.
Hi, I'm Jim Massey, professor in engineering environmental science here, USM. I've been working on this since 1970. Not
Whoa,
here, but
even
University of
longer than
Delaware.
me. That's, well, I'm impressed.
People have short memories. We went through the oil embargo, and everybody was for renewable energy. Maybe about a year and a half later, back came the oil. Are we going to have the same short memory? Number two, if people want to get up to speed, look at the NREL website out in Golden, Colorado, nrel.gov. It balances the infrastructure against renewables. Number three, what is your opinion on hydrogen fuel cells as a means for getting through some of this?
Okay, 3 questions. Your first one was? I'm sorry. The trouble with asking 3 questions, it means I have to remember all 3 questions. What I should do is answer them one at a time, right?
It referred to the memory course.
Oh. Was that perfect or what? I did not fake that. Yes.
The first
we will
one was
forget.
short memories.
Yes, we are a species with pretty short memories. We live day to day, and whatever tomorrow brings, that's good enough. So the answer is yes, we have short memories, just like we say right now, oh, gas and oil are cheap. Why are we worrying? No big deal, right? Cheap. Because we know what the price is going to be 20 years from now. Forget it. We need to find a way to lengthen our memory based on history and not just based on what we hope is for tomorrow and make believe we expect it to happen. NREL, here's what National Renewable Energy Lab, right, is NREL. And there's multiple national labs around the country, LBL, Lawrence Berkeley Labs, et cetera, which I was at recently. My big fear is that most of them will be defunded, and they're starting to take off materials off the websites that are not politically acceptable right now. Just like I explained the jobs report that said too many good things about clean energy, right? It's being eliminated. What I'm saying is that so the challenge is going to be how do we keep those alive? How do we not lose that knowledge? Because that's important to deal with this memory problem. Right? And hydrogen fuel cells, I hate to say it, I'm not up on hydrogen fuel cells in terms of where they're going and how much we could rely on them. So I need to learn more about it. So.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, over here. And I think we pretty much, last question.
Hi, I'm Asa Heb. I go to Unity College. And my question is, what, if any, future do you see for nuclear energy? And do you think there's any potential for it?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite get your... Oh, nuclear. Oh, that's a very controversial. Some of my environmental friends have basically gone back and forth on the issue. We can't forget nuclear. Nuclear is a carbon-free generating source. But is also very expensive, and the issues associated with nuclear disposal waste are very serious and heavily subsidized, and whether we really can afford the current state of nuclear technology long term. So that's a difficult one, and even some of my environmental friends are back and forth on that question of where nuclear fits. I tend to be one who does not feel that nuclear is the right solution, partly because it is so sort of big and far away from where the power is needed, right? So the distance on transmission and distribution, and that what causes reliability issues, and the cost of nuclear waste disposal has not been really. That's sort of the memory problem, right? It's like, we don't talk about that, right? So those are my concerns. Those are my concerns. It's not a complete slam dunk no, but it's pretty close to the expense and the issue of where do you put them, is a big question.
Thank you.
So I want to thank all of you for being here. Thank you for letting me come up and blab a little bit. And so thank you all, and good luck, and great organization.
Great. Thank you very much, Stephen, and thank you for the great questions. If you have additional questions for Stephen, he'll be here through lunchtime, so feel free to hunt him down and pester him some more on those memory questions and nuclear energy. All very good questions. Thank you. Curious, he was talking about home heating. Let's just kind of quick show of hands. How many folks are using home heating oil for their home heating? I'm assuming all of you have turned it on by now. We've had a nice delayed start. How about propane? How many folks are using propane? Good show there. How about, oh, I forgot biodiesel along with the home heating oil. Of course, many of you having home heating oil actually have biofuels built into that with blending. How about wood? Wood, there we go. Solar. Nuclear. Anyone nuclear? Home nuclear? What am I forgetting? Heat pumps. Heat pumps. There we go. How many have more than 2 of those mentioned? Or 2 or more? There we go. Excellent. All right, well, we pretty much have quite the range. And wind, sorry, wind. Anyone home wind? Solar, we got? All right. Good. Thank you very much. So we are going to move on. You've got your agenda in front of you. Of course, the facilities are out and down the hall if at any time you need to, and we'll be providing some direction as we move along. But next up on the schedule is Jess Knox. So Jess will be in charge of the panel called Show Me How This Thing Works, talking about R&D challenges, demonstration opportunities, and commercialization initiatives. So Jess, I love the start of his bio. Jess is a startup and innovation ecosystem builder. That says it all right there. But those of you who don't know Jess, he has a varied background, worked for the SBA down in Washington, but those of us around here know him best for Startup Portland, Maine Startup and Create Week, Maine House of Genius, Maine Accelerates Growth, and Venture Hall. So please join with me in welcoming Jess to the podium, and he'll introduce the speakers.
Well, good morning. Is this thing on? Can everyone hear me okay? How about now? Whoa. Thank you, Jeremy. I'm very excited about this panel. I do want to say thank you to Stephen for that compelling keynote. And I don't work in the area of clean technology or environmental science, but it's clear to me that the solutions to our energy future are incredibly easy. I'm just testing to see if you're awake, and that there's thorough agreement about what those solutions are in this room itself. So thank you very much for being here. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on our panel's biographies because I believe that all of you are excellent readers. But my goal today is to make this the most exciting panel that you've ever seen on this topic. So bear with us. So just going down the line here, Lynn Abramson, who's the Executive Director of the Clean Energy Business Network. Welcome, Lynn. Dr. Habib Dagher, who is the Executive Director of the University of Maine's Advanced Structures and Composites Center, and a variety of other things. John Egan, who's here from CEI. He's been in community development for over 30 years. And Joe Miliaccio, the other scientist on the panel. He is. He's a former scientist. But Joe is the Director of Business Development at the Maine Technology Institute. How many in here do not know Joe? All right, Joe. I'm helping you, man.
Thanks, Jess.
Target-rich environment. The title of this panel, as Patrick said, was Show Me How This Works, R&D challenges, demonstration opportunities, and commercialization initiatives. So let's get right into it. So let's talk about what the opportunity is for Maine to demonstrate leadership and support of this entrepreneurial spirit that we see in this room, and we see not just in Maine but around the country. But what can Maine do to support this effort around entrepreneurship and innovation in developing next-gen technologies? Lynn, do you want to give us your perspective from your sort of national and what you've seen around the country?
Sure. Can I use that clicker, perhaps? Great. Well, thank you so much for that introduction. I really want to thank the staff and the board of E2Tech for inviting me to participate today. I'm really excited to be here from Washington, D.C., and share some of our perspectives on what's happening at the national level and then how that relates to what's going on here in Maine. First, just a little bit of an introduction of my organization. I run the Clean Energy Business Network, which is a group of over 3,000 business leaders all across the United States who are primarily providers of clean energy technologies and services. But our group is very diverse. We do have a number of university professionals, nonprofit organizations, and other types of members. And you can see at the bottom of our slide just this bar graph in terms of the technologies represented, that they are quite diverse. And we have a very expansive view of clean energy, from renewables to natural gas to efficiency to a wide range of advanced transportation and energy solutions. We are not against any energy technologies, and in fact, many of our members are working to, for example, make oil refineries more efficient, or to utilize combined heat and power at coal facilities, or utilize carbon sequestration. So we really try to look broadly across the energy industry at solutions to power our electricity systems and transportation systems more cleanly and efficiently. We were, I would say the majority of our members, as I mentioned, they are quite diverse, but the majority are the C-suite executives of small and medium-sized companies. So that does add some unique challenges and perspectives to the group. We were actually founded by the Pew Charitable Trusts back in 2009 to serve as a resource to inform and engage these business leaders in policy issues. And we spun out this May to partner with the Business Council for Sustainable Energy, which is a 25-year-old, very reputable, nonpartisan trade association in Washington that is mostly composed of the sector-specific trade associations for particular industries, as well as some of the larger companies providing clean energy solutions. So, for example, Schneider Electric, Johnson Controls. And so the idea of bringing together our business voices that are smaller and medium-sized companies with some of these big power players is something that we think that strategy will really help to promote more unity within the industry. Our mission areas are to inform and engage clean energy business leaders in policy areas affecting the industry, and that was really the foundation of our work at Pew. Also, we work to educate the public and policymakers about diverse energy technologies. And I would even say there's some education within the membership as well about availability of new products and services that they may not be aware of from some of their fellow members. And then our third area, which is sort of a new one for us, is to try to provide resources to help our members address common business challenges. And this is a new mission for us that's really made possible by our move into more of a trade association model. And I would say also just on the policy front that most of our work occurs at the federal level in terms of providing information to our members and performing advocacy. But we are also doing a little bit of education on the state level as well, in terms of best practices. So I want to just start with giving you a landscape of what the clean energy market opportunity here in the United States looks like. And, I think most of you are being part of that economy, certainly recognize what the potential is. But a few quick facts. So last year in 2016, clean energy technologies attracted $58.8 billion in private investment here in the United States and supported over 3 million jobs. And that's actually from that job study that Stephen cited from the DOE. In addition, when you look globally, renewables are projected to account for almost half of installed capacity and 1/3 of electricity generation by 2040, and attract roughly 3/4 of private investment in new capacity during that time. So when we look at what the growth sectors are of the energy economy, they are in those clean energy sectors, in renewables, in efficiency, in natural gas. So this is a tremendous economic opportunity, regardless of any of the other environmental or national security benefits. And if we want the United States broadly, and then Maine specifically, to be able to capitalize on that and attract some of that investment here, we need to have a few key ingredients in place. One of those, this is not the only ingredient, but one of those is policy support. And when we were at Pew, we actually did some modeling with ICF International, looking at what the impacts of investment in early stage R&D were, and found that for every dollar that was invested from the public sector in early stage clean energy R&D, we attract $1.60 back to the economy in a diversity of sectors. So this is something that actually pays off for the long term. Looking at the opportunity here in Maine, now, these data are a few years old, but another study that we did during our time at Pew was looking at emerging clean energy economies in states. It was just mentioned earlier today that in the Clean Tech Index, Maine is now in the top 10, which is great news. We also chose Maine because we thought there were a number of key policies in place that were creating a supportive environment for clean energy, and looked at how that was translating to investment. So again, these data are a few years old. We had actual data from Navigant Research up through 2013 and then projections moving forward to 2023. But if you just kind of look at the magnitude of those bars, you could see that we were finding that the renewable sectors we looked at and combined heat and power together were projected to add at least $200 to $300 million per year to Maine's economy. And some of the areas of particular growth we were seeing were in wind, in biomass, and in combined heat and power. So those seem to be particularly promising sectors for the state. And then just looking at some of the case studies of seeing that deployment and that innovation, you have a range of very exciting companies and projects under development here in the state, from onshore wind to new innovations in offshore wind and floating platforms, to biomass energy, to the nation's first commercial tidal energy plant. And so, truly diverse, innovative companies here. And a lot of that is made possible by the natural resources that you have here, but also by those public-private partnerships. So a lot of these types of projects are helped come to fruition in part because of state or federal policies, partnerships with the DOE and University of Maine and researchers here that help take some of those ideas from the private sector and help spur them. So this is all great news, right? So we can go home because the clean energy economy is moving forward in the US, it's moving forward in Maine, very promising. But those of you who are working in this sector here in this room know that that is not always the case, and there are real challenges. So I want to present some data. Now, I don't want to imply that this is statistically significant for the clean energy industry at large, but we have asked our own members, as we have moved just a few months ago into a new organization, and we've begun a strategic planning effort. One of the things we are doing is talking to our members about what are some of the real problems they're facing. And we've done a questionnaire of members with over 200 responses, and formed advisory committees with groups of the members and had roundtable discussions with them to better understand their problems. And we have roughly 60 members participating in those conversations. And one of the predominant barriers our members have identified are government or utility barriers to the deployment of their technology. So this gets back to our first mission area of policy. What kinds of information can we promote between the business community and policymakers to help sort through some of those challenges? The second biggest obstacle identified was customers' lack of education on the technologies. So when they're going to meet with the prospective clients, the energy managers, or sometimes it's a higher level decision maker within the company or organization, there's a lot of barriers there. So again, I think there's a lot of work that can be done on that educational front and promoting awareness of the availability and benefits of these technologies. And then a number of business-related challenges that we hope to try to provide information and resources to address, including attracting investors, the return on investment period, that's both a policy and a business challenge, finding skilled staff, and finding contractors and other partners. That's something that we hope we can help with our networking capabilities. In our deeper dives with the committees, there are a number of challenges raised from policy uncertainty at all levels to some of the challenges with utility business models, and that's something that is an active topic of discussion in many communities across the nation. There are real challenges to work through there. Financing barriers, and then innovation barriers. And I want to just dwell on that last point for a moment, since that is more the focus of this panel. We've heard from some of our members that a lot of government requirements, permitting processes, grants, incentives tend to have prescriptive requirements that, and for very good reason, but sometimes it's hard for emerging technologies to qualify. There's really not a place for them in some of those policies. So that's something that we need to think through. And additionally, the policies and market landscape tends to favor incumbent technologies, whether that is oil and gas and coal, or even when we're talking about, solar, wind, a lot of times the more established providers sort of have a foothold, which makes sense, but it's challenging sometimes for newcomers, entrants to break into those markets. On the investment front, we've heard that one characteristic of disruptive technologies is that the market doesn't exist yet. So it's hard for companies to attract investment when there's a significant significant technological and financing risk there. And then we've heard from some members that they've actually found more opportunities for some of their technologies in other countries that are more favorable for innovation and for clean energy. And so we are at danger sometimes of innovating new technologies here in the US, but commercializing them elsewhere. So I want to just end with a few thoughts on policy, since I am coming here from Washington, and that's sort of the perspective I wanted to provide. And there is a lot going on right now at the federal level that could impact market opportunities for clean energy. I'm not going to dwell on all of these, but tax policy appropriations, Stephen mentioned earlier the FERC, actually I believe, no, this was right before the FERC reliability pricing rule came up earlier. That's, potentially could subsidize coal and nuclear and could have impacts on clean energy markets. The Clean Power Plan and Paris Agreement, walking those back, we are actually making quite a bit of progress toward the emission goals set forth by those policies, but still walking back those policies does send some uncertainty into the markets. And then on the positive front, there has been some progress on bipartisan energy legislation in the Senate that might actually come up to the floor during this Congress. The only two policies I really wanted to make sure to leave you with some insights on are on the funding front. Right now, Congress is operating on a short-term funding measure that expires December 8th, and they have to figure out what they're going to do for the rest of fiscal year 18 after that. And as noted earlier, the president's budget proposal does include some pretty steep cuts, and Congresswoman Pingree mentioned this in her video. Any of the non-defense energy programs would be slashed in that budget proposal. The House the House appropriations bill is a little bit better, but we still see about a 50% cut to renewable energy and efficiency programs, a complete elimination of the Advanced Research Projects Agency Energy, which funds potentially disruptive, transformative energy technologies, some reductions in the national labs. And so, and the Senate mark is a lot higher, so we have been proposing to, as Congress works out the final funding levels, to try to be as close as possible to that Senate level. And then something that I think is of tremendous interest to a lot of particularly more established energy providers is the tax landscape. And right now, as we speak, both the House and Senate are very rapidly advancing some pretty significant tax legislation that would reduce corporate tax rates. It would streamline the personal tax code, reduce some of the brackets, eliminate certain types of deductions. And on the House side, there are quite substantial changes to energy credits in their legislation, nothing right now on the Senate side. And we've heard that it's more likely that they'll kind of put off energy measures to the end of the year. So rapid developments there. So essentially, my pitch to all of you is, we're based in Washington. E2Tech here has been a fantastic partner in Maine. I really want to try to have this be the beginning of a dialogue between our organizations and among geographies. I think there's a lot of work we can do to think proactively on the policy front at all levels, to promote more education, and to promote more collaboration within the industry. So I would urge all of you to consider signing up for our organization at www.cebn.org. I've left out some materials about the network as well as some of the research I mentioned today, and look forward to continuing to work with all of you.
Great, thank you. So far, so good. Joe, when you think about ways that we can do this, before we have Dr. Dagher talk a little about his work, where's the opportunity for leadership from Maine to really be encouraging this entrepreneurial spirit? And is it technology development, or is it the business model that's needed to deploy that technology?
Well, I'm going to throw Jess a softball because I think listening to you and watching what goes on in the world, and especially in Maine, I think it's really welcoming a culture of failure. It sounds weird, but failure of assumptions that result in greater learning and actual better focus on the problem you're trying to solve. So for me, it's a lot of, having been part of startup at MTI 17 years ago after I came out of IDEX, I've got a lot of relationships that I've seen evolving over 15 years. And there's a lot of good teams and talent who have cycled, but most times they haven't nailed the concept first go around. Maybe they've taken money towards that. And when you give somebody money to run with an idea and the idea turns out not to be a great idea, as long as it results in a greater learning or maybe a stop the flow of money, that's a good thing because it brings you greater focus. So I think it's a cultural thing, Jess. Honestly. Well, I'll let the lenders like John talk about that. But honestly, I mean, that's feeds right into it, John, is you've got to understand what the team was trying to do. Did they get greater focus? And, can we make another run at something? So it's a culture of acceptance of failure. Yeah, sounds weird, but.
So in terms of someone with a breadth of experience in commercializing technology in a variety of areas, Dr. Dagher, I think I first met you, and many folks probably did, with Bridge in a Backpack. But you've interacted both with federal policy, state policy, local interest in your projects. Can you talk about the role that all of those things played in the development of what you're doing and the leadership that you're sort of building in this, not only the state, but nationally and globally in this war?
Yeah, absolutely. I have a few slides here to go ahead and talk about that.
Great.
So the panel today is talking about what are the challenges to go from an R&D, from an idea, all the way to a commercial product that you can go ahead and get it out there and sell it. I'm going to show you examples of products we've developed at the University of Maine over the last 10 years that we actually commercialized, that are out there in the sector. And we've learned a lot how to do that and how not to do, what to do, what not to do. And the biggest thing we're trying to commercialize right now is offshore wind technology, floating offshore wind technology. So I'll talk about that as well. I'll also talk about some of the new facilities we've built at the University of Maine to help us drive these technologies forward. What you're seeing here on the picture is 2 floating wind turbines, 6 megawatt each, that will be placed 14 miles off the coast of Maine. It would be operational, if all goes well, in 2020. These float. They're floating over the oceans. The hull is made out of concrete, produced locally. The hull has over 100-year life. They're manufactured dockside and towed out to sea. And the good news is after a 5-year-long competition from the Department of Energy, the state of Maine is one of 2 projects right now moving forward under the Advanced Technology Demonstration Program for offshore wind. So we'll be the first to build a floating wind farm in the United States if everything goes well. So I'll talk more about that later. So this is the University of Maine. So I'm not at the University of Southern Maine, but a little bit north of that, in Orono. We're established back in 1865. We're the largest university in the state of Maine and the most comprehensive university with a lot of research and development. And we work very closely with USM, and we love to work with USM as well. This is the lab I work in. It's called the Advanced Structures and Composite Lab. And we bring advanced materials into construction. We're established about 20 years ago. We have 180 people who work in the lab. And over 95% of our funding comes from outside the state of Maine in terms of contracts, research that we do. We've spun off 14 companies, and over 2,000 students have worked in our labs, and every one of them who's graduated, who worked in our lab, had a job when they graduated. And they're all over the country and the world. These are our partners across the country and the world, so we do research and development very heavily. These companies send their money to Maine so we can do research and development for them in the area of materials and structures in a variety of end-use applications, including renewable energy. Examples of things we've actually commercialized is called the bridge in a backpack. It's a technology that was invented at UMaine, and now we have a business producing these and selling these bridges. These bridges come in a bag. You can fit a 60-foot arch in a University of Maine hockey bag. You can inflate it out of the bag, and within 3 hours you have a tube that's stronger than steel that you can actually put them about 4 to 5 feet apart, as you see here in this picture, and build a bridge. And this has been commercialized in Maine, and it wasn't easy. This is the longest composite bridge in the world. We built that. This is the Knickerbocker Bridge in the Back River in Booth Bay, 540 feet long. The girders you see in here are 70 feet each, made here in Maine, and they weigh 1/2 the weight of a steel girder, so it reduces the energy it takes to build bridges. These bridges typically have about half the carbon footprint of other types of bridges. This is the first ballistic tent ever developed by the Army, approved by the Army right now. It's a ballistic technology we developed that's actually greened, amazingly enough. The panels you see here are thermoplastic composites, 100% recyclable, that we've developed to up-armor a tent and turn the tent into a large walk-in helmet. The Army's approved that. We have 2 companies in Maine that are producing it right now. And just about a month ago, one of the companies received a $35 million contract to produce these in Maine. This is a boat for the Navy SEALs that we've also commercialized working with Hodgson Yachts in Maine. This is an 83-foot-long high-speed interceptor. Originally made out of aluminum, it was heavy. We turned it into a composite hull, which reduces the energy it takes to run this boat. But this is one of the things the boat has to do. It has to go over 50 knots and turn around at 50 knots and go the other way. So you'll see this boat here up in Booth Bay Harbor, turning at 50 knots of speed. That's for the Navy SEALs, all made out of composites, quite a bit lighter than concrete and steel. That's been commercialized. Amazingly enough, we talk about commercialization, the commercialization ecosystem. Because we're working on inflatable bridges, the bridge in a backpack, NASA came to us and says, can you help us put people on Mars? And what they're trying to do is inflate a decelerator to slow a spacecraft as it enters Mars' atmosphere. It basically is like a big airbag that inflates from a nose cone of the spacecraft. That spacecraft weighs 40 tons, travels at hypersonic speeds, and you got to slow it down enough so you can pull a parachute and land it. And we're doing testing for NASA on this right now, and all that started with these inflatable tubes you see right here that look like the bridge in a backpack tubes. So now the bridge in a backpack is going to Mars. I never thought that would happen. Okay. No, talking about innovation. Talking about facilities we're adding to Maine to help drive the innovation ecosystem. We built the second largest wind turbine, wind blade test facility in the United States. This is a blade going into our lab. You can see it right here. It's 160 feet long. You can see the cars on the side to give you a sense of scale. That's as long as a 16-story building entering the lab. And we do testing for companies on these to make sure they hold up for 20 years. So this is a blade being tested in our lab using resonance testing. Essentially, we have moving masses. The yellow masses shake the blade by moving back and forth. And show you here another video, similar video. Typically, in about 2 to 3 months, we can replicate 20 years of damage offshore. So these are the kinds of very unique facilities that Maine has to drive the innovation economy in renewable energy. We also built an offshore wind laboratory, a wind simulation lab. This is a basin that creates wind and wave storms to replicate almost any environment on Earth. That's the only facility of its kind in the United States. What you can do is you can create wind storms and you can create wave storms and combine the winds and the waves in different directions. I'll show you here at the very end what it looks like. This is the only time they'll let me into the wind basin here. You can see the size of the waves you can create when they're slowed down right in here. But you can see here, we don't typically position people in the wind tunnel, but this is where we're slowing it down. But you can see how the waves are being created, the winds are being created to basically drive innovation in the ocean energy. Somebody asked the question earlier, how do we drive the innovation in ocean energy? This is one of the things you could do, is use basins like that. But let's go back a bit to the state of Maine. How much does your family spend on energy every year? Remember about a decade ago, we were paying $4 a gallon in energy costs in the state, $4 a gallon in gasoline and heating oil. And the average family in Maine was paying $10,000 a year to heat the home, run the cars, and then buy electricity. But electricity is the cheapest part of all of that. Notice electricity is $1,000 per year, heating oil is $4,000 per year, and gasoline is $5,000 per year. $10,000 represents about 20% of the average family income. Now, at $2 a gallon, that number drops almost in half, but it's still very significant. So if you add that all together, and this is an important number, the latest number from EIA, the Energy Information Administration, is Maine spends $6 billion a year in fossil fuels. $6 billion a year. That's twice the state budget. The state budget's about $3 billion per year. Twice of that is spent on fossil fuels. And every time heating oil and gasoline costs go up by $1 a gallon, another $1 billion leaves the state of Maine. These are very significant numbers. So how much electricity does Maine use? We're a summer peaking state. We use about 2.4 gigawatts of electricity, of capacity in the summertime. And what's our largest renewable resource? Offshore wind. Actually, there was a very interesting report that was published by the National Renewable Energy Lab ranking all the states in their ability to produce offshore wind economically. And guess what state won? That was a report came out two months ago. The National Renewable Energy Lab said that Maine has the biggest capacity of all the United States to actually produce offshore wind cost effectively. And if you look at where offshore wind goes, within 50 miles of the U.S. coast, the wind gets better and better as you go north, and when you get to the Gulf of Maine, you have 156 gigawatts of offshore wind. A gigawatt is a good-sized nuclear power plant. It takes 2.4 gigawatts to power the state of Maine. So that's it. So where is offshore wind globally? Globally, Europe leads the world. Guess what? They have 81 offshore wind farms in Europe. 81 farms. 81 farms. 3,589 turbines in 10 different countries. And the leading being the UK up there and Germany. So how do we develop technologies that work for Maine? Maine has very deep waters off of our coast. When you're about 3 miles off the coast of Maine, you have 300 feet of water. You cannot fix the turbines to the seabed like they do in Europe. We had to float them. And so we've developed a floating turbine technology, and we've tested it to make sure it works. Very unique technology. And this is a floating wind turbine in our wave wind basin subjected to a 50-year storm with about 65-foot waves relative to the size of the hull. To give you a sense of scale, I took the liberty to add a school bus right here. You see that little school bus right there? Okay, that's in yellow right there. That's the school bus, and that's the turbine size. Okay, so to give you a sense of scale. So this is a 6-megawatt machine with a 500-foot rotor, scaled down by 150 scale, and subjected to a 50-year storm. Yes, it does survive a 50-year storm. We know how to do that. We know how to predict what happens in a 50-year storm. So then we built a 1-to-8 scale version of a full-time unit and put it in the water in 2013. This is a concrete hull being lifted dockside and placed in the water. And then we towed it out to sea using a tugboat. We had pre-installed mooring lines and anchors and undersea cable in Castine, and then we plugged it into the grid. This is what it looked like off Castine. There was an undersea cable that brings the power back to shore. And this is a storm that we saw on December 15th, 2013. This was a 50-year storm relative to the size of the hull. What you see there is actually snow blowing across. And the snow blowing across is blowing at about 50 miles an hour. The wave height relative to the size of the hull were 50-year waves. 50-year waves. This thing's floating. Do you see it moving at all? This is floating, and it's not moving. And so we proved out the technology thanks to the work we've done with the National Renewable Energy Lab. As a result of that, the Department of Energy selected us for a $40 million grant to go build 2 full-size units off the coast of Maine and be the first floating wind project in the U.S. Throughout the world, there's a big competition on floating wind technology right now. France has funded last year 4 floating wind demonstration projects using 4 different technologies. Scotland just put one up here about a month ago. There's 2 more they're going to put up there. Japan has 3 projects. Portugal has 1. And the industry, the floating wind turbine industry, is expected to be between $250 billion to $500 billion in the next 20 years. Trillion. So people say offshore wind's expensive, it's never going to get there. Well, let me tell you what, there's nothing farther from the truth. These are the numbers last year and this year from Europe stunned the world. Because of scaling up the technologies, they've been able to drive costs down. In July of 2016, a 350 megawatt project by Dong Energy bid at 7.27 euro cents per kilowatt hour. In Denmark, a few months later, Vattenfall bid a project was awarded a project at 6 euro cents a kilowatt hour. Following that, a 700 megawatt project in the Netherlands at 5.45 euro cents a kilowatt hour. And last April, in Germany, Dong Energy and EnBW won bids at 4.4 euro cents a kilowatt hour. So for anybody who tells you offshore wind's too expensive, tell them no, that's not true, because it isn't. So with this in mind, we are hoping that our offshore wind project in the state of Maine would start construction on in 2019. And we would have it connected to the grid in 2020. It would be the first floating wind hull in the United States. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Dagher. For Joe and John, every entrepreneur that I run into starts the conversation by saying they need capital. I mean, literally everyone, everywhere, in every state I've ever been. Can you talk a little bit about the resources that your organizations have available or have invested in emerging technologies or scaling technologies in this sector? John, you want to start?
We're at a different size of the marketplace than offshore floating wind farms for what we're financing, but we start with the small entrepreneur, and we can help start getting products out into the marketplace. We don't have grants, we're a lender. We do have venture capital for companies that are adding jobs and emerging into their marketplace. Specifically with the clean tech, we started financing solar 12 years ago in the state of Maine when the landscape of solar vendors was much smaller than it is today. We have helped finance biomass and anaerobic digestion, and we have also financed marine hydrokinetics with ORPC. And so we're trying to be meaningful. I wish I had more flexible money than we do. Thankfully, we can team up with Joe at MTI to try and put things together.
Perfect segue. Joe?
So MTI tends to be, first of all, who thinks they know what MTI does or has received any type of funding from us? All right, target-rich environment, Jess. There's a lot of hands that didn't go up. So what I would say is, rather than run through the slide deck, we could do that, but we live in the valley of death most of the time. So MTI works anywhere from applied research past product launch. So typically when you're developing a new product or starting a new company up, the cash flow is negative for a long time. And that's the place where people need capital. But, before capital comes in, even a small grant, we might do $5,000. We have anything from $5,000 to $500,000 in grants and loans. We'll also, for the more sophisticated ramping companies, we can follow on with equity investment. So one of the things before the next question is, hey, I need money. The only question is like, what for? What's the problem we're trying to solve? And this was back to my point earlier. Many times the problem you think you're trying to solve that you're going to make money off of isn't the actual problem. It's the coming out of idea generation that you might have had, concept screening, but it really isn't until you start going out to the marketplace and asking customers, talking to the people that you think have the pain problem, that you really discover what the solution is they need. So I think at MTI in the state of Maine for now has been doing a pretty darn good job over the 17 years that we've been here. The state's been very supportive in providing us about somewhere between $6 to $8 million a year. And we can only use about 10% of that to run the place, so we're 10 people. That money gets into projects that are risk. They're not ready for debt. They're certainly not ready for venture capital or even sometimes angel investors, high net worth individuals who like investing. So that's that's the question you always ask. Sure, you need money, but there's many things you can do to prove out a concept before you go pulling down $100,000, $200,000. And everything we do requires skin in the game. So if you want $1 from us in a loan, equity, or debt, you need to have $1 beside it somewhere. So that also, many times we help find some of that capital.
Thanks to both of you. So one of the questions that were brought up in the previous session, one of the questions that came out was about NIMBYism. And one of I think the challenges that we certainly hear in a lot of different industries is the ability to take these new technologies and explain them, because we always talk about federal and state government, and I love that, I can talk about that, but we always leave out local. And Maine is a particularly enthusiastic community with local control. And so I guess as we talk about ways that our governments can support innovation, early adoption, demonstration projects, I'd like if we could maybe start with Dr. Dagher. What are some ways that you think that local and even regional governments can play a role in helping to streamline that conversation about those types of projects and those types of technologies?
Certainly very, very important questions, and particularly what we're doing here, we're facing that every single day. And I think the ability to really be a convener, to start a dialogue between the opposition and then the others, if you wish, is really, really important. And then communities, local groups, municipalities can be the convener, if you wish. So proper information, proper data goes out there. I think the biggest challenge we see is misinformation. A lot of the folks who really oppose something is because they don't know about it. Most people oppose something because they just really don't know enough about it. And they're concerned, they fear it, they don't know what it's going to do to their lives. And I think just the simple fact being able to convene in a room and all talk to each other and really present facts is very, very important. And we see this right now. In Monhegan, for example, on Monhegan Island, we've had an opportunity to work the Monhegan Islanders where our project's going to go, which is the most affected community, if you wish, with this particular project, got together. They formed a committee to work with us, officially convened by the committee. We worked for 3 years together, and then just about a month ago, they voted unanimously to work with us on a community benefit agreement and to move forward with the project. But it took, if you wish, the local leadership to pull people together so we can all talk and reach a solution. I think that can happen, and the biggest issue we have really is lack of information, misinformation.
John and Joe, I'd love it if you talk about this as well. And one of the things that comes up in a lot of our conversations around here in a lot of places is this conflict between sort of we're going to produce things for local versus we're going to produce something locally to sell globally, right? So it's a different mindset and an approach, and I wonder how you navigate that and what you see as an opportunity for local and regional governments and other institutions to play a role in sort of convening or sort of transferring information about those different mindsets because we certainly need to do both. But a lot of what the conversation has been in here is groundbreaking, global markets, really high impact stuff. So any advice or insights that either of you want to share in that area?
Since the mic's here, I'll start, John, and pass it over. I think, when we talk about state, local governments, or even federal governments, I want to be clear that MTI is a 501c3 nonprofit. Even though we are funded by the state, we are very apolitical. The way we look at things that regard policy or politics is in relation to how it affects a product, idea, or megatrend that may be coming. So with that said, one of the things that you can address NIMBYism with that I can think of examples on, I particularly like the idea, and I think we'd be plating some of this year, I like the idea of challenge grants. We've all heard of X prizes. I like the idea of an M prize, right? What if Maine has an issue with offshore wind? I'll actually give an example we've been working on recently. I'm a former commercial clam digger while I was going to school at Maine. And one of the things people sometimes don't like to see is people working out in front of their house, or barges or mussel rafts, or, I look at it and say, hey, look, money out in front of my house. People I know, friends. So what if you engineer, we're working on something right now, engineer to submerge a mussel raft? How do you create technologies to address some of the NIMBYism instead of saying, hey, get over your NIMBYism, say, hey, we're going to engineer some solutions to help mitigate some of that. Habib's probably familiar with, wind turbines make a lot of noise, right? In some cases, there's been a lot of work over the years through technology development to mitigate that noise. We've done a little bit of that. So for me, I'd say the solution many times to NIMBYism is all of what you said, but also trying to engineer yourself to the future. So, John?
There's always pioneers in the marketplace who are going to do the demonstration project because they want to be the first in, or to show their investors or their neighbors or whoever. But we also get the chance to work with municipalities, and very quickly municipal policymakers, whether it's a council or a select board, might have an interest in hearing 5 minutes about the green benefits of a renewable installation, but pretty quickly the conversation gets to the budget. And what is now happening is that municipalities are making decisions to invest in renewable production for their own energy consumption because it makes good budget sense. We don't have to do 5 minutes of discussion on the carbon saving elements and what it's doing for the planet and how we're diversifying away from a single source and part of that $6 billion that's leaving the state every year. It comes down to, this is a way for the municipality to save money, and what local policymaker doesn't want to tell their constituents, we can lower your taxes.
That's always a winning argument. So after capital, one of the things we hear a lot from entrepreneurs and innovators is, how do I partner with a big incumbent to get my technology either into the marketplace or to partner on product development, all those things. And I'd love for Lynn and Habib to talk a little bit about, Lynn, what you're seeing in other parts of the country, innovative approaches to that, sort of how do you pluck the sort of rising innovation out and try to facilitate that. And then Dr. Dagher, a little bit on your experience and the success and maybe some of the biggest lessons learned.
Great. Yeah, I think that is something that's of interest to a lot of our members, is potentially licensing to or partnering with larger incumbents. And I think I've seen a lot of success in that, particularly when our members find early adopters that, for example, and this kind of goes back to the NIMBYism issue as well, when you can partner with a local university to do some of the proof of concepts, you're also engaging the students and the people in that community. That's one effective means, and that also helps provide some credibility that helps to attract some of those, potential larger scale incumbents, attracts some of their interest. So, we've seen examples of members that have worked on demo projects in partnership with ExxonMobil and Houston Area Research Center, bringing together, some of that expertise, and I think that helps establish credibility, and that particular member in question eventually attracted the interest of Germany's largest manufacturer, which acquired their company. So I think that's one strategy is when you can find those early proof of concept places, whether that's in state or local or federal government or in universities, to establish some of that credibility.
Yeah, these are all very good points. The biggest thing we try to do in trying to get technology out there is find people in the marketplace, incumbents, that have a good self-interest to participate in the project. You got to find the right people who have the right mindset, who will benefit from the project at the end of the day. And for example, in our offshore wind project, we've partnered with Chimbro and Pete Viggio at Chimbro and many of his wonderful people, and they're builders, right? They build big things, and they build big concrete structures, big concrete bridges, and this is a big concrete structure we want to build. So it makes sense to partner with them, and they've been partnered with us from the very beginning, just because we have common interests, if you wish. So that's a way we have moved forward, is really partnering with the right people who have common interests. So.
Joe and John, I'm interested in your advice on this as well. One of the things that I know a few entrepreneurs in the room who are good at this, they're really good LinkedIn hustlers. They spend a lot of time on LinkedIn trying to find that person, that man or woman in these organizations who care about this work. And but how have you seen successes in sort of the younger company, earlier stage company, building that partnership with larger incumbents?
You had the mic. I thought you were going to start.
Well, I'll filibuster for one more minute. One of those examples are
yeah.
one of WEX's first clients. WEX, for those of you who aren't from Maine, WEX is one of the largest publicly traded companies in Maine. One of their first clients ever was Oakhurst Dairy. And so that story doesn't get told very often.
Oh,
So, but they, at the time, WEX was a sort of fledgling company, and after capital, a really big, timely paying large customer is the next great thing for a growing company. So,
yeah, I think I got the drift. So one of the great assets we have here in the state of Maine is our tendency to look at sometimes Maine as one big neighborhood. So the connections that you can make in Maine are critical. Back to my point when Jess was asking, hey, I've got an idea, I need money. Many times you don't need money. First, what you need are mentors, advisors, and connectors. So one of the things we do here, Jess does in his work, John, and frankly all of us here, and it sounds like what we do is connect people many times. In this industry, Jeff can talk a little bit about, they're our point person at E2Tech with Northeast Clean Energy Council. They have a strategic partners network. So if you have an idea that you think X large strategic company would want, they can potentially try to get you some connections in those companies. So I think is that what you're getting at, Jess? Is that whether that's to help you find a company, a customer, whether that's to help you find talent, whether that's to help you find, some companies I know have even said, hey, you know what, I got some market research on that we did a couple years ago. We'd be more than happy to share. And that could be, tens of thousands of dollars worth of market research from maybe somebody like an Oakhurst or a big company. So more and more, and a lot of what Jess's work and what we're all trying to do is to try to get these larger strategic companies to share their talent. They bring talent to the table. A lot of times we all love to hate the big company, the corporate, publicly traded thing, but you know what they do is bring talent to Maine. That talent cycles out many times, and we could all go on probably with a bunch of companies in all of our portfolios that have been started or are staffed or led by people that didn't start in Maine, but got here because somebody offered them a good quality job in a great place and outcompeted them. And then they stay here. They're sticky. So hopefully that gets to a little bit of your point.
John?
Part of the success that CEI has had is that we have a couple of different arms of the company that act and function nationally. And so they're finding partners that are working in a much larger scale and a much larger marketplace than what we have to offer in Maine. I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges for a lot of entrepreneurs in Maine is even if they have a brilliant idea and are perfectly able to execute it, getting the investment capital, which is operating in an orbit that is much bigger than what we have in Maine and looking to sell to marketplaces much bigger than what we have in Maine, it's tough to get them to pay attention here. So part of some of the advantage that we can bring to our partners is that we have finance and investment contacts from our activities around the country. And so we're able to bring in, occasionally foundations will take a look at this, but we're generally able to bring in finance partners that have done larger deals for us elsewhere to get them to come take a look at something that's happening right here in our backyard in Maine. The scale issue is one of the biggest challenges that we find. Occasionally we'll find an entrepreneur that wants to grow their company 25% a year, and after 4 years gets to a certain level and says, I'm okay, I'm just going to kind of coast along here. That doesn't usually happen. That's not the DNA of the entrepreneur. Usually there's an appetite to keep growing and expanding, and at some point the marketplace in Maine is not rich enough, so they have to start looking elsewhere.
Great advice. So if we could pull the lights up a little bit, we can, thank you, Jeremy. We can take questions now for the panel here at either of the microphones. And I'll just keep talking until one of these two gentlemen get to the microphone. All right, excellent. Why don't we start over here?
Hi, my name's Ray Wingard, HDR Engineering. I have a couple observations. We provide consulting services to a lot of different types of developers of renewable energy. We've seen a lot over the years, and I think a couple takeaways, at least currently, is the change that's occurring in the electric industry, the grid system, really moving towards distributed generation, decentralized generation. And so I'm seeing the effects of that for development of new renewable energy generator projects. It's creating enormous opportunity. I see a lot of uncertainty in terms, there's a lot of uncertainty, and a big driver of that uncertainty is consumer behavior. So there's a lot of things in motion. I think one thing, a question for Lynn. Obviously, the biggest obstacle is the power purchase agreement, and there seems to be an undervalue of renewable energy in the marketplace, especially when you consider the public health benefits of zero carbon, the sustainability, environmental benefits, and also residual value. Most pro formas, the time frame is 20 years. Renewable energy is a sustainable benefits I don't think is really recognized in the market. And then the other thing is the ancillary services that are provided. There's a lot of, I think, focus on the intermittent energy and some of the problems that create, but there's also the other side too, especially in a decentralized, distributed, generator market. So the question is, on a policy basis, what are some strategies that could really recognize the value of renewable energy?
Well, that's a great question, and I think that is one of the biggest obstacles we've seen to renewables, but also to distributed generation, since you mentioned that some of those ancillary benefits, there is no monetary value assigned to them. I think I'll talk a little bit about distributed generation first, because I think sometimes the ancillary benefits are a little easier to grasp in terms of on-site generation, reliability, and we do see, sometimes in some progress in campus-type situations, as well as critical military facilities, and increasing awareness of that value, and some efforts to try to figure out how to turn that into a price signal. So, I mentioned what FERC was doing on the coal and nuclear front, but I think more quietly within a lot of agencies, they are starting to look at how can they facilitate these types of projects because they do see the reliability benefit. On valuing the cleanliness or sort of environmental benefits of technology, I mean, that's a tough issue. There are a lot of policy structures that do that. That's what renewable portfolio standards are intended to do, or energy efficiency resource standards, or demand response. On the national level, I mean, there's been exploration of such types of signals, and the Clean Power Plan is an example of a mechanism that potentially drives a market for simply based on efficiency and cleanliness and emissions reductions. There's been discussion of doing something like a renewable energy standard at a national level, but frankly, it doesn't have the political traction right now. There's been other things, cap and trade, carbon taxes, frankly, don't really have political traction right now. So it's an uphill battle. I think we're seeing gradual progress for the actual end users. I mentioned some of these examples, but not huge, nationwide sweeping policy signals. We're seeing a lot more discussion of that on state and local levels, where you do have state governments, utilities, local governments saying, okay, we do think there's a value to promoting some of these environmental benefits, and so we're going to move forward on our own, and perhaps we'll catch up at the nationwide level eventually.
Good morning. Hi, friends. Thanks all for your time and input this morning. It's been a great panel. My name is Andrew Butcher. I'm an entrepreneur. I work with cities around the country addressing land use issues, and I'm faculty at Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh, addressing social innovation, community economic development. So by nature, I work with a lot of unlikely partnerships and try to broker different sector involvement in addressing sort of systemic issues in cities. And so I guess my question to you all, given your perspectives on the market is there, policy drivers could be there, market demand is there, investment potential is there, what are opportunities and/or examples that you point to or you think about as effectively utilizing unlikely partnerships? If we have significant growth in renewables that is less harmful emissions in the air, partnerships with healthcare industries and health agencies could be an interesting opportunity for growth in the energy sector, but that's probably not something we spend a lot of time thinking about. So from your perspective with your work from policy, R&D, investment, financing, what are some of the unlikely partnerships that you think could help tilt the momentum in gaining the political will to be able to advance the local energy market, renewable clean power market? Thanks. It's a big question. I hope it makes sense.
I'll start, and that only because it's very fresh in my mind and that we've seen it just in the past 12 months. In a lot of communities outside of Portland, the idea of adopting to renewables is still kind of a head scratcher, and people are wondering, is this for real, and does this require a lot of fancy lawyers, and do I have to get involved with all my tax return information to figure it out, et cetera? And there's nothing, I think, more settling on that question than watching your fire department in your local town that you might even volunteer with put an array up on the roof and have a nice big meter that the school kids can come in and see how much generation is going on top of the firehouse in terms of offsetting the kilowatts used at the town hall. So I think bringing it down to a local level and having it be seen as not just something that the Volvo segment of Maine is going to be involved in, but it's going to happen everywhere.
I just want to echo that from our own work that we've done through Maine Accelerates Growth and some other things is, and everybody in here knows this, right? There's a long-term, short-term problem, right? So long-term partnerships are very difficult to sell in short-term politics, right? So that's a challenge. Some of the greatest partnerships that I know of are where cities are engaging in, they're bringing in futurists and others to sort of bring in the incumbent industries to start talking about what their challenges are. Things like you see the use of driverless cars to bring patients to hospitals for elderly patients to sort of make their appointments and take their prescriptions. That's not a direct connection in renewables, but there's a whole argument to be made there about getting more cars off the road and what the opportunities are there. I'm sure you are familiar with Carl Pope's new book that talks about some of the opportunities that cities have in doing that work. So I'm not sure, actually I think the city of Portland entered into a partnership, not necessarily, maybe it's not an unusual partnership, but I think with Rapport, correct me if I'm wrong, but right, with Rapport to measure their sustainability in buildings across the city. So there are some examples of that. I don't know if anybody has seen any national examples of partnerships between sort of unlikely incumbents in that area.
I think I'll take a very slightly different tack, which is to also think about unlikely partnerships in terms of your customer, and not just in terms of, I think, you mentioned sort of the healthcare angle of, and I think that goes back again to environmental benefits, for example, but I think having a broad and expansive view of what your potential customer could be and getting to know their problems, and I think Joe mentioned this earlier, that's one of the things that you're attempting to do is help identify those market opportunities. And they are not necessarily going to be with consumers or companies that have a sustainability mandate, though that certainly helps because then okay, they're interested in this. But is there some other problem you can solve, such as, wow, there's a power outage, the lights in this hospital have gone off and now patients' lives are at risk, or an oil company trying to reduce flaring, that's an unusual application. I think there's a lot of potential market opportunities out there that you might not be aware of. So I think it's taking a look at what your technology can do and then working with strategic partners who have expertise in what the potential market opportunities are there, and you might find some unusual partnerships.
Yeah, thank you. Roger Stevenson. I own a small public affairs and communications firm and represent the Union of Concerned Scientists here in Maine. Question for Lynn and for Dr. Dagher, I think. First, I noticed, Lynn, in your slides, there were two bumps in private investment, $60 billion in 2011 and 2015. What impact did the stimulus funding have on those two bumps? And I was involved in bringing ARPA-E into the House and Senate discussions in 2009, concerned that that's going to be zeroed out. And so for Dr. Dagher, how important was ARPA-E and federal in particular? So I guess two questions. One, the impact of public support through either ARPA-E and the PTC, perhaps, in those two bumps in private investment, and the importance of ARPA-E in the future.
Yeah, that's a great question, and we often do see that that data from Navigant Research. We've also done research with Bloomberg New Energy Finance showing similar trends, that when you have a policy signal such as pending expiration of a tax credit, or pending deadlines for meeting the ARA, the stimulus grant requirements, you'll see a rush of projects. So I think that is a major factor. I think that was one of the major drivers of those bumps. You do sometimes also see other dynamics at play with, you'll see a bump when a really, truly huge, significant project is due for completion. Maybe, do you want to address the ARPA-E question?
Sure. Very, very important question that you're asking here. Very, very critical. Let's go back to the first question about the stimulus that you said. The stimulus was key for us, actually, to be able to move the project forward. We won a competition under the stimulus grant competition program to build the 1-to-8 scale floating turbine I showed earlier. Without the stimulus funding, that opportunity would not have existed. The lab that I showed you, where we showed the blade, was also a stimulus competition that we won. There was 120 different states that applied for this money, and we got lucky and we won that. So the stimulus was critical to get us to where we are today. In terms of ARPA-E, we do have an ARPA-E program. We had one actually a year ago, and then it got cut out. ARPA-E, beyond just our particular microcosm, if you wish, but ARPA-E is very critical to the future of the country's innovation. If we want America to be great again, we need to invest in great technologies, right? So,
thank you.
Hi, I'm Ann Laughlin. I'm an engineering and environmental science teacher at Casco Bay High School in Portland, Maine. I'm uniquely situated because I'm not only in not a traditional high school, but a small high school that's housed inside of a vocational technical center called Portland's Arts and Technology High School. And, you know, it's no surprise that we're coming out of an economic downturn and that the educational system or the pipeline for innovation and engineering and workforce development was seriously stunted by a lack of funding because basically all of our money went to like pay increases and keeping the lights on. And now the technology is moving fast and we need to be able to provide kids in K-12 opportunities to experience like real tools of engineering to be ready for the workforce of the future. And I know this is about innovation and business development, but I think that we can't move forward as Maine's economy if we don't have the workforce and the intellectual capacity. And the University of Maine at Orono, I was just up there. We've got a serious gap between engineers leaving the field and people coming into the field. And I'm just wondering if anyone on the panel could speak to how can we, with limited public funding for public education, provide opportunities for kids so that they see themselves as part of that economy moving forward.
I guess being looked at. So in terms of UMaine, we're working on a variety of programs to help public schools get involved in the innovation economy. One of the projects, at least our lab is doing, is we're sponsoring a competition, two competitions every year. One is called the Wind Blade Competition, one's called the Wind Storm Competition. And we help schools throughout the state of Maine with curricula and how to actually bring teams of students together to build models of these turbines. And they work throughout the year to do that, and they come to UMaine, and we test them all, and so we provide, if you wish, for free support for the schools to do that. So if you look them up, it's called the Windstorm and the Wind Blade Competition. We had close to 500 students and their teachers come up every year, and the students who win actually the competition end up getting a scholarship to come to the University of Maine worth $20,000 per student. So if you look that up, we've been running that for a number of years. We're going to do it again this year. That's a specific way to do that. So the curricula has already been developed. You can look them up on the line, and we'll provide your teachers, if you wish, with support so you can actually create those groups of students who work on these projects. Students absolutely love it. They build floating turbines, come to our lab, put them in the wind tunnel, and they go up there so excited about the future. So.
I don't know what the answer is, but being somebody who came out of a classical school and went to Orono in civil engineering and washed out of that, even though I didn't ended up getting to my third year, what I learned there was amazing, and it's this culture again of how do you expose people to that? I ended up staying in a STEM career and getting a job here in Maine, but that's not where I started. So my observation is, I don't know the answer, 2 daughters, junior, a sophomore and a senior now, sent them to, my oldest one, to the charter school in Portland at the Baxter, came out of Baxter, great startup concept, kid doesn't know how to code, I don't know, the method of learning for that is great, but her feedback was, Dad, I've got to have some structure, I've got to be pushed to do stuff, and I can't have my final exam being, how did my stand-up paddleboard float at the end of the year? So in our public school, how do I get my daughter some coding? Well, we have one course. I don't know what the answer is, but me as a parent, even as a STEM parent, I don't know how to get my kids motivated about it because it's scary to them, especially girls. Something happens. And I sat on the executive advisory board at USM at the engineering and math and computer science school. And if you look at the statistics of what happens, somewhere between middle school and high school, these girls fall, they're outperforming. and then they fall away. I don't know what. One great thing that was oversubscribed, Jess, tried to get my daughters into WEX sponsored, and some of the other companies sponsored the Django Girls, the coding. So I think there's real opportunities for, at least I'm just speaking to that part of it, because as a father of 2 daughters, so I think there's a lot of opportunity for corporate sponsorship there, to answer your money piece.
Kathy?
Hi, I'm Kathy Renaud with Innovation Policy Works. I think we all know that it takes a really long time for R&D to come to market. Some are relatively fast, like if you're developing an application, but if you think about biotech or increasingly thinking about new energy technologies, it takes a really, really, really long time, 10, 15, maybe more years. And the more I think about it, the more I've thought about how energy technologies and biotech are really similar in that it's really big science lift on the one side, but there's also the whole regulatory space that you have to deal with. Habib, I'm such an admirer of yours for your persistence, if nothing else. At least in biotech, the FDA framework has stayed more or less the same for a really long time, and in the energy space, it seems like every time we turn around, people are changing their minds about what the hoops are. So have you got any words of wisdom for other entrepreneurs and researchers like yourself who are trying to stay the course while everything is changing around you?
Very important question. We've been at it for offshore wind at least for 10 years right now, and I tell everybody in our team, eat healthy, exercise every day. We're in this for the long run. And it really is. It's a long-term effort. It doesn't happen overnight. People who work in this field really have to believe in what they're doing. They have to believe they're doing the right thing. And that's really critical to keep the team together and so forth. You got to get the right people with the right mindset who say, we're on this because it's a lifetime goal. We're going to make this happen because it's good for the planet. It's good for the economy. And that's the kind of people you want to pull together around you to make a team that will last long enough to get through all of this. So. And I want to thank you for all the work you started. We wouldn't be here with what you've done. So thank you.
Thanks, Kat.
Just to very quickly add to that, I think one of the critical ingredients is that we need to bring together that community, and that is exactly what E2Tech is about. This is what we're trying to accomplish as well. Because I think unless you have dialogues with those regulators among the industry, no one's aware of these challenges, and we can all learn from each other. And I will say, I thought I saw that John Ferlin was sitting somewhere back there. You want to go talk to him, because I think this is an example of someone who has worked with a very innovative technology that also faces some permitting challenges and successfully navigated that, and it is a long haul. But I think we can all learn from each other, and that's why we need these kind of communities.
Last question?
Going back to what was said, previous person, about, people in the pipeline, getting people interested in it, staying in it, women staying in it, and so forth. I think that what we have to do as technically oriented people, not just engineers, but the biosciences and all those, we have to get ourselves out there. I go down Congress Street and ask somebody at random, what's an engineer do? And I'm lucky if I get a beats me answer. I'm serious. And, what we are doing at the IEEE now in Maine is we're trying to get out there. That's why I'm here today. We have a booth here today. That's why on Monday I was at Oxford Elementary School, yes, elementary school, talking about what engineers do, talking to even pre-K kids. What do they do? Beginning to plant the seeds. And if I can make a plea for help to the media here, tell people more of what we're doing. Go to us. Engineers don't all have propellers on top of their heads. Some of us do, but not all. And not picking on you for having windmills, because I happen to think they're good.
I have it on my tie, too.
Oh, good.
Not only on my
Glad
head.
to hear that. Oh, and as far as women in engineering, drop by our booth. I've got a handout of women who changed technology. Hedy Lamarr, the actress, what is she best known for? What was her greatest contribution to society?
The iPhone?
Yeah. No, not the iPhone. No, the underlying modulation technology.
No kidding.
She holds the patents on it. Ah. Oh, and who runs those 2 small companies, GM and IBM? women engineers.
There you go.
Enough said.
And as a non-technical person here, I just say, if you want people to pay attention to the work you're doing, and you're not on social media, on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, no one's going to pick it up. I mean, everybody who's doing something, whether you're inventing or you're producing or you're exploring, if you're not on those platforms, God love the newspaper reporters in here, I'm friends with them, but the reality of it is, they also get as much information, leads from their stories, from what they follow. So if you're not on those platforms, like, you're sort of, that's sort of malpractice in my opinion. So if you're not engaging with people in that world, then there's a great opportunity for you. Last question over here.
Jess, you're not the only non-technical person in the room. I just want you to know that. I'm Pat Eisenhardt. I'm a candidate for governor of Maine. And I have recently finished a book called Dark Money by Jane Mayer. She's a New York investigative reporter for New Yorker. And my question is directed, and in that book, I should say, she detailed a long history of EPA fines against Koch Industries. Greenpeace has identified Koch Industries as the #1 polluter in the United States. My question goes to Lynn. Would you please enlighten us as to what impact you think the Koch brothers have had on clean energy policy in the United States and also in the state of Maine?
Oh, geez. Why do I get this one?
In closing, or maybe on the intricacies of the regulatory environment with large polluters and how that structure has changed over the years.
Oh, well, sure. I had the experience of working in policy in Congress for quite a bit and was glad to get out of that more into my think tank and nonprofit world. I mean, I'll just put it this way. Look, there are so many competing needs and interests in this nation, and one of the things that I've kind of learned over the years having constituents come in, meet, they all have valid points of view. They all have a valid perspective. Everyone's interested in promoting their own sector, their own economic interests, what are their own communities' resources and needs. And so I think we need to have, try to break down some of those walls, and instead of it's always us against them, well, what can we do in partnership? Are there ways we can, and I mentioned, for example, can you utilize fossil fuels as efficiently as possible? Now, is it always education? Is it always dialogue? Are there going to be, people with their own political agenda? Of course, that's how politics are in the United States. But I think constituents need to see past that, and kind of going back to the education aspect, that's why those of us who are working with these industries need to just try to get our messages out there, educate the public, educate policymakers about some of those solutions that are available and some of their benefits, and try to counter messages from others who might have a different point of view.
Great. Thank you very much. We landed this baby right on time, Jeff. Thank you to all the panelists. Thank you for participating, and we'll see you all at lunch, right? Next.
All right, thank you. Wait for a moment. There we go. All right, getting my microphone here. Thank you all, panelists. I was just sitting in the audience and feeling my mind blowing with all the amazing ideas that are flowing just from the various conversations. A couple thoughts I'll share with you. One, Joe, on the STEM issue, having been a former middle school and high school science teacher, what I found is that young women in particular, if they lost interest in math in middle school, then they were lost to science in high school. So keeping them in math is a key issue. But I'll say that was many years ago, and I am now fortunate to be touring some colleges here in New England with my 11th grade daughter, and the number of young women who are majoring in STEM fields is astounding. It has dramatically increased over the last 20 years. So there is great hope for the future, not only in that we're getting more folks going into STEM fields, but that we have the diversity of thought that young women will bring to that field. So hope for the future is definite. The other thing that struck me as I'm listening to the folks and the examples they were mentioning, there are companies that were mentioned in each one of those talks, and there are people here in the room from most of those companies. There is a great benefit to networking with those folks, and to put a shameless plug in for E2Tech, we're the vehicle for that networking. Please consider becoming a member and networking with those folks to help folks. You can network with them here and then ongoing through our forums. I also wanted to thank Joe at MTI personally and NECEC. My company, an existing environmental consulting firm, had its own startup within our company to start an online environmental compliance tracking tool for our clients. We went to MTI, received several seed grants to pay for the programming and the development of that. And in 2 years' time, we were able to pay back that investment that we put into it and have greatly increased our revenue and been able to hire 3 or 4 folks just from that. So it's a small example, but it means a lot. And NECEC provided excellent mentoring in that process. So there are some incredible resources here for everyone to participate in, whether you're starting up in a garage or you're part of a Fortune 500 company or anywhere in between. The new ideas that you can come up with are important, and the funding and support that you can find through these organizations is critical. So, speaking of networking, we have exhibitors in the lobby here on the first floor and up on the second floor. I encourage you to spend some time talking with those folks, finding out how they can help your business and promote your ideas. Shortly, in about 10-15 minutes, the folks at USM will have lunch ready. Lunch will be ready up on the second floor. So you get lunch on the second floor, and then you have to find a place to eat it. So there are several options. There are classrooms on the second floor. There's space in the lobby, and you're welcome to bring it back here to Hannaford Hall as well. Eat lunch, network. A couple important things. One is at 3 o'clock, we have a lot of different things on the schedule, but at 3 o'clock in particular, I recommend you come back for the innovation policy panel. It should be a vigorous debate and interesting ideas thrown around. Prior to that, we want you back here at 12 noon for the E2Tech talks. You are welcome to, again, bring your lunch here and see those talks. Other points, Jeff, or is that just...
I think that's good. We'll break up after the E2Tech talks into 2 sessions, one in here, one on the second floor, both very interesting sessions to provide more information on resources that are available, not just to the energy and environmental sector, but really to any business, whether you're a startup or a more established, mature company. So a great afternoon ahead.
Excellent. All right, thank you all for your attendance so far. Enjoy lunch and networking, and we'll see you back here at noon.